Hello, hello. So I'm Adam Morgan, and the topic of making the jump to creative director. I assume that the audience here today, and by the way, thank you. I think we've almost filled up both sessions on this, of who wants to be a creative director. So my guess is there's probably a good portion of you who are senior creatives, you've been doing this for a while, and you're like, I'm ready to make the jump. I'm ready to take this step, and what do I need to do? How many of those are out there in the audience in that category? Okay, fair amount. Or there may even be others who are already creative directors out there, right? There's a few of you already out there, so you're probably just thinking, all right, we'll see what this list is like, see if I'm doing all this stuff, or if I need to change some plans here. Let me talk a little bit about, my expectations of when I wanted to become a creative director. So starting out early on, I just had these thoughts of like, I've got my CD. They're always choosing the art, or the campaign or the concept, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I'm pretty talented. So it's about time that I, find a spot or find an opportunity to become a creative director myself. And so I think there's a lot of people in that boat, and you're maybe wondering like, where's my promotion, right? It's like I've been doing this, I'm talented. Why is creative management not coming up to me and saying, all right, we've now dubbed you the next creative director, run and do it. And I'm going to talk through why and how that journey it doesn't come the way we think it will, and give you a good roadmap to find a way through that. But first I'm going to start with a story of my journey. So it was a dark day in December. There was and before I worked at Adobe for the last 4 years, I worked at a lot of international ad agencies. And at one in particular, there were four of us, four creatives, 2 art directors, 2 writers, and we were kind of the go-to teams, right, at this agency, McCann Erickson. And it felt like to me all the time, all the big campaigns or all the the big cool projects, it was usually a competition between these 2 teams. And sometimes I'd be with one art director, and sometimes I'd be with the other one. And we were always battling it out. But usually, like whoever won the big campaign, it was one of us 4, right? And so I thought, we were doing pretty good. We were kind of the go-to creatives. And then we had this big, huge staff meeting, and our executive creative director announced at that time there were going to be some promotions, and I found out that day that the other 3 people were promoted and not me. And I was the only one that didn't make it, and I thought, wow, we were all just as talented. Sometimes my ideas were the ones that won, sometimes someone else, but it was heartbreaking. I had no idea why, and I'd been doing a great job, so I thought, but it really caught me unexpectedly, and so I was really pretty sad about that. So I want to talk to you guys all today so that you don't have to have your dark days in December. Or maybe you've already had a dark day in December. I don't know. I don't know everyone's situation. But that's my hope, is I want to at least share the path, because since that day, I've learned a lot more of why I didn't get promoted, and I know exactly why now. But back then, I couldn't see it. I was just too focused on my career. So why me? Why am I going to tell you about all this stuff? Like I said, I started in the mid-90s, been doing this for 23 years, been a creative director for the last 12 years, and so I've gone through this process on the other side of things, of helping people get through it, helping people get promoted on different teams, and had a lot of great conversations. So really this presentation, and this is my first time going through this, is just having a conversation with you. I'm just going to share a lot of stories, and I just want to have a great conversation. Because the truth is, I've had a great career, and at this point it's all about how can I help others who are going through those pitfalls so that they don't have that to find their way the same way I did years ago. In ways that I'm doing that, I've got like a marketing book that's coming out in January. I'll talk more about that later. But I'm also working on a second book, which is called Building the Creative Machine, and it's all about giving the tips and tricks to everyone else who's trying to do this, to building an awesome creative team and helping them succeed. So if we're going back to this conversation, so I've had this conversation, that dark day in December, from the other point of view many, many times with a lot of people. And so what I want to do with you is I want to explain to you the why. Imagine we're having a huge one-on-one interview here. Ignore that there are hundreds of other people next to you and hearing the same thing. But I want you to really think deeply about some of the things that I'm going to go through and how they apply to you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain first, for the first part of this presentation, I'm going to go through the why. Why do we need to really think deeply about becoming a creative director before we just do it? And then finally, I'm going to give you the 9 steps, the 9 skills that you need as a creative director. And that's probably going to be the bulk of the conversation, is going through those nine skills. I'm also going to talk to you about some of the conversations I've had with others and what they've said. And then I'm going to give you some tests at the end where you can test for yourself to say, am I ready? Am I ready to be a CD? Do I have what it takes? All right, first let's start with, what does the internet teach us about becoming a creative director? And I would encourage you can go out and do all of these same searches. I've done many of them. And there are tons of articles out there about, here's the 14 steps to becoming a creative director, the 5 steps to being a creative director. But unfortunately, there really isn't a good user's manual on this topic. It's not like you go to school and they say, hey, someday after you get really, really good, hold on to that puppy because that's going to teach you how to be a CD, right? And it's funny, actually, when you look at the content that's out there, here's the type of content that you're looking at. It says something like, oh, start out in your career and understand the value of ideas, and then learn the good programs like Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator. And then the next step is get a lot better at those programs and a lot better at creative ideas and just keep doing better and better. And then eventually you'll be so good at it that they'll come over and say, oh, you're our next creative director because you're super talented. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is false. That is not how you become a creative director. That's how you become an awesome senior creative. And many of you probably are awesome senior creatives, but it's just, there's such a chasm between a senior creative and a creative director, and it's a completely different experience. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I also want to point out that I'm giving you my perspective from being a creative director at big ad agencies, small ad agencies, in-house at Adobe, just my perspective. So obviously there's going to be some of you out there that have taken a different path. Maybe you went straight from school, started your own thing, and you're just like an all-in-one, you wear a million hats, you kind of have your own design company, whatever that may be. That's a different story. I'm just going to give you kind of the path and the day in the life of what it's like to be at a big agency or a big company and what that kind of creative director is all about. So we hear what the internet teaches us, and now let's go to what a lot of us think a creative director is all about. At least this is what I thought it was all about when I started. And if any of you haven't seen this, this is just a frame from an awesome video that we did, that our EMEA team did, and it's called The Hovering Art Director. But it's all about this guy in the colorful shirt, backseat driving over the poor art director and saying, no, do this, change this, do that little thing over there. There we go, it's perfect, mate, it's awesome. So that right there is kind of the expectation that I had starting out of like, what's the job of a creative director? I thought, okay, well, they're the ones that get to choose which campaigns we go with, right? They're like, oh, I love this idea and hate that one, we're gonna go with that. And they're the ones that just get to manage other creatives. That's kind of what I thought the job was. And so certainly when I didn't understand the why, when they would not choose ideas that I thought were awesome, and I'd be like, what? Why are they choosing the lame ideas and presenting those, right? I didn't understand a lot, but these were the expectations that I had of a creative director. But I wanted you to take a different perspective for just a little while, because I don't want it to just be our personal expectations. Maybe there's a lot of emotions you have around this topic, or a lot of thoughts, or it's something you've been wanting for a long time and it's not happening. But I just want you to get rid of all of those for a moment. And as I go through a lot of these steps, I want you to keep the perspective of leadership, of senior leadership. Imagine whatever it is, the CEO of your company or the executive creative director at your agency, whatever it may be, I want you to put on their perspective, because this is hard. We have all these expectations, all these motions, but I want you to think about, what are they looking for when they're looking for a creative director? Because that's what you need to do. You need to make sure you have the right skills so that when they see you, they're like, that's the person who's going to do it. They're the ones. So please have that perspective. All right, now let's talk about the first big insight. What makes you an amazing creative is not what makes you a great CD. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, because we've been thinking about us and our career, and we've been training like those 14 steps said earlier. We've been trying to become the most amazing, talented, superstar creative. That's what we've been told is what it takes to become a creative director. And I'll tell you right now, like when we get through this list of 9, that's like at the very bottom of the list. Now, I know that sounds a little harsh and a little weird, but again, put that other perspective on. Being a rock star creative is important, but it's not what's going to make you a CD. Let me give you a story about this. So back in the mid-90s when I started, first before I went to agencies, I started at a newspaper. And I was the guy that did all the design and all the ads. And there was another team that did all the sales, and they would go out and find clients and sell them on an ad thing, and then I'd make it for them, and we put it in the newspaper. I know newspaper. Then I found out that the sales guys made like 3 times the amount as me. And being a starving college student, I'm like, I'm going to go be a sales guy. I don't need to, at least for the job, I need to make more money. So I put together this awesome presentation because there was an opening on the sales team. And it was this killer presentation on why, I would be a great salesperson. And the guy who was hiring also taught at the university, and I found out later that he would use that presentation as a great example of a great sales presentation. But when it came time for me to find out about the job, I found out that he passed and he chose someone else. So I went and asked him, I was like, what gives? I thought that was a great presentation. I know the business, I know everything about it. Why are you not promoting me or letting me get this job over the sales guy? And he's like, because Adam, I want to keep you as the creative guy. You're great at the creative. If I lose that, then all the ads aren't going to be done. I can find salespeople. Of course, I quit that week. Went to an agency, my first agency, DSW, and whatever. That's you can't control your career. But the point is pretty important. Like, think about the perspective from leadership. When they have this senior rock star creative, why do they want to lose that? Right? So keep that in mind. All right, so to be a creative director, you need a different set of skills. It's no longer about the hard skills. So if you're thinking about, I know the design programs, I know how to create things, I know how to be awesome, at being a senior creative, but it's the soft skills. And I know this is a terrible analogy on here with a hammer and marshmallows. It just looks like white blobs up there, but it's the soft skills that are going to really matter for you. Let me give you an example. When I had that dark day in December, of the 3 other people that were promoted, it turns out one of the other guys, when I was like, he's an okay designer. He wasn't the best designer, he was an okay designer. And so I was all bitter, why did he get promoted? And I did, and I thought I was awesome. He's not as awesome. But what I found out is he had amazing people skills. I mean, he may have been an okay designer, but he went on to be an amazing creative director. And right now, he's the CEO of an ad agency in Utah. Awesome skills, but it's just a different set of skills. So keep that in mind. It's not the same skills that you're going to be working with. And speaking of those, let's think traditionally what ends up happening in some companies. I won't say everywhere, but in some companies, the reason why we have these perspectives is because the person who's the rock star becomes the creative director. And why does that happen? A lot of times it happens because it's either a retention strategy, like they don't want to lose that talent. And they're like, if we don't make them a creative director, then we're going to lose them, so we'll make them a creative director, right? Or maybe it's just seniority. Sometimes we get into this idea that seniority is what should make someone a creative director. But the truth is, the skills in leadership are completely different than the skills that you've learned as a creative person. And maybe being promoted and you don't have the right skills isn't necessarily the right step. If you think about it, how many creative directors, or of those of us who are aspiring to be one, read books on leadership? How many of us are actually taking a course, be it a college course, a Linda course, whatever, on leadership? Or when we listen to podcasts, there's so much content out there on design, and I'm sure all of you have your favorite design podcasts, and there's nothing wrong with that. You still need to keep that. But how many of us actually listen to leadership or vision? Okay, there's a few hands, good. All right, some of you do, good. But I'm just saying, collectively, we usually don't. I mean, we've grown up in our industry and we think we're doing all the right things, but we're not building those skills. We're not focusing on leadership. We're not focusing on anything else. And one thing I try to tell people that I work with is this idea of, if you want to lead, you need to read. Meaning you need to keep up with the latest trends and topics, and not just about creativity, but about marketing and about businessing, all of those things. So I had an old creative director, and at the time I didn't understand it, but he was always reading articles and books and whatever it may be. And I started to notice that, first I was like, why are you doing that? Do you want to be an account guy? Why would you read all that stuff on marketing? You want to be creative, right? But he would bring those into conversations and presentations, and it was always the perfect moment that he would bring some little tidbit of some book or some article that he read, and it was amazing of how he could work the room and build trust just by reading some things. Another tip is, if any of you have read the book, How Will I Measure My Life by Clayton Christensen, he's a professor over at Harvard. It's really interesting where he's like, we craft our businesses so well, and it may be, or your online social presence, whatever it may be, but we're really sucky at crafting our own careers. In his book, he gave an example of where he and all of his cronies, they all went, left Ivy League schools and went off to these big companies, and they were going to work their way up the ladder. And they had one buddy who went off to work in a mine, and they're like, what is he doing? That's just ridiculous. And then after a mine, he went over to some other company and started working in operations. Then he worked at, some other job, and he was learning logistics and other things. And they thought he was just, missing an opportunity of growth. But when they came back for their, I don't know, whatever it was, 30th anniversary from school, he was suddenly the CEO of a large corporation. And it's because he specifically went to all of those different jobs to learn different skills, so that when it was time to become the CEO, they're like, who's the person who knows logistics and sourcing and purchasing and all these other things really, really well? That person, versus these guys have just been in one department the whole time. And I'm not telling you to go take other jobs. I'm just saying, think about your career. So if you're preparing to be a CD, as I go through this list of 9 things, I just really want you to think about why you're doing it, because that's really, really important, is the why. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to plan your career out, but you also need to stop and think about what drives you. A lot of times when I'm interviewing people for a job, I'll just try and talk to them about what their goals are, like what are they excited about, what gets them amped up. And it may not be some of these things. Let me give you another example. So at one of the agencies I worked at, there was a guy named, let's call him Rob. And he marched into my office, and he was having his dark day in December, right? So he marched and he said, Adam, what's going on? I've been here longer than all the other senior art directors in the agency. My work is awesome. The clients love it. It's just, it's some of the best in the agency. And yet you just promoted another person and you didn't promote me to ACD. So what gives? Like, I need an answer right now. And I went through and say, Rob, do you really want to know? Let's have at it. Let's have this conversation. This is great. And I walked him through all the things that it takes, like what the job of a creative director really is. All the details. I showed him my calendar. I showed him talking about meetings, about owning presentations, about working the room and having relationships, like all these great things about being a CD. And at the end, good on him. At least he was honest. He was like, oh, all that stuff? Yeah, I don't want to do any of that stuff. That sounds horrific. I get it. I see why I'm not a CD, because that he's like a big time introvert, always wanted to stay in his cave and just do awesome work, but didn't want to go out, especially presenting and talking in front of people. Ugh, never. So find what's important to you. And I just want you, we'll come back to this in a minute, but CD is awesome. I love it. It may not be for everyone. So you just need to first have that conversation with yourself. Is this the right path? And I guarantee after we go through this presentation, you'll have a good idea of, you'll either be like, this sounds terrible or this sounds awesome. And being honest is really, really important. Another thing that's really funny, so I was at a developer conference about a month ago, and there was a session on how to be a manager, and I thought, I'll go listen to that, because I know this talk is coming up, and I'll see what their perspective is on it. And it was funny, as I got into there, the lady who was presenting said, I only became a manager because when someone came to our group of 17 developers and said, who wants to be a manager, everyone turned away and didn't want anything to do with being a manager. And she was young, and she's like, I guess me? I'll try. And they were like, good luck. You just, you just lost your life. And I thought that was so interesting, because when it comes to creative people, we're the opposite. I know most people are like, who wants to be a CD? All our hands go up. Me, I know what to do. I know what I'm going to, I want to make the decisions. I want to be in charge. I got this. So it's a completely different world. So just be honest. I know we all want to be there, but be honest. And going back to Rob, the reason why it was really interesting is, with career paths, the way they're working out today, it's not like it was when I started in the mid-90s. I mean, back then, you'd start out as a PA, you'd get a foot in the door, you'd work up to a designer, and you're basically doing all the work of the art director. And the art director, you finally could, design and craft some ideas. And then eventually, if you worked really, really hard, you'd move up to ACD and CD and group CD. But that's not really how it works anymore today. There's a new model that's out there. And it's this idea that you really have to find what you're good at. Oh, sorry about that. What you're good at and your strengths, and then just really play to those. Because there may be people who really are technical and love, maybe being a senior production person, or maybe they're awesome at ideas, but they don't want to manage people. Whatever it may be. I know at Adobe, we just this last year changed all our job codes. And the job codes, this is just a really geeky thing, and like behind the scenes of whatever your job, it doesn't matter what your title is. Like your job code tells them what level you are, right? And it used to be, You'd be an individual, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you could be management, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that was like the path. So a lot of people wanted to jump up into management just because more money, more opportunity, title, right? Like it was all of those things that you feel like you're progressing with. But they completely changed it now, and now it goes, like individual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. And then the management track starts about halfway through that and then goes up. Meaning, and this was also true at the agency that I worked at before Adobe, you can still make a lot of good money and be very valuable for the company, and you don't have to be the creative director, all right? So there are opportunities, and when I explain that to someone like the Rob at the agency, he was like, great, that's the path. That's the path I want to take. So just keep that in mind. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from being a CD. I'm just telling you, be honest with yourself and figure out what's right for you, and then we'll go from there. All right, the preamble is over. Let's get into what the 9 steps are. And again, at this point, I want you to take 2 perspectives. Think about what would upper management be looking at for this job, and then also where am I on all these steps? How am I doing? And I'll come back to the end, and then you can do a little review. Another thing I forgot to say. At the end, I'll show you how you can get a copy of this whole deck, so you don't have to be like going crazy with notes or taking pictures. So I'll give you a way out. All right, number 1, relationships. So I'm going to go through the things that matter in order. And I put up there, no more being a lone wolf. And this one is really hard, because if you think about it, your whole career, what have you done? You go off, whether you're a writer, a designer, an art director, a videographer, you go off and you sit in your cave and you get in the zone and you're just creating and you summon the muse, and that's how you do really, really good work. That's what we've trained ourselves to do as creative people. But when you become a creative director, you cannot do that anymore. You cannot go off and be the lone wolf. You can't just do your own thing and expect that everything's going to work out. Because a huge part of being a creative director is the relationships that you build. And why is that? It's not just because, I'm not talking about you have to be an extrovert. Maybe you're an introvert, that's fine. My boss is an introvert, and he does great at being an ECD. What I'm talking about is that there are all the different stakeholders that you have, right? They need to see you as someone they can trust, as someone who gets it, and not just gets it as in the creative gets it, right? Like doing good creative. But they need to understand that you're there and that you're going to solve all the problems and that you're the go-to creative person and that you have a plan, right? That trust is super, super important. And so it's all about becoming a strategic partner. If you're not a strategic partner, guess what you are? You're a set of hands. Who wants to be a set of hands? Well, maybe some of us, sometimes, But for the most part, you don't want that. You want to be known for your ideas and for your presence and for your vision. And so the only way you can be a strategic partner is if you build those relationships. And every company is going to be different, so I'm not going to tell you what those relationships are, but you need to find them and you need to build them because that is critical. They need to trust you. And here's a good test so that you know if you're doing good enough with relationships. And it's this: if you no longer have to get yourself invited to a meeting. Right? If you're always scrambling and the meetings are happening and you're not there and you're like, oh, can you invite me to that? Can you invite? You have not built the relationships. So if it's just a go-to of like, oh, we got to have them in there, then that's a good sign. All right, number 2, talking Khaki. So at Adobe, for our Creative Cloud for Enterprise group, we had this whole series called Talking Khaki. And it's because the idea is that, you've grown up in your career talking the language of design, talking the language of writing. And you think about all these other stakeholders that you're trying to build these relationships with, and they've learned to talk business with their MBA or finance, and this is a completely different language. And so we have to learn to talk the same language as the tan pants so that we can understand each other, right? And we've built a whole bunch of content on this, but it's really, really important to understand that. And I've seen some creatives that when you get in a room and all of a sudden we start talking budgets or numbers, their eyes roll over and they're like, all right, let me know when we're to the creative part because I'm out, right? You can't do that anymore. If you're going to be the CD, you can't just be like rolling your eyes at numbers. You have to understand them because you're going to be in charge of a lot of them pretty soon. And here's the other funny thing. I was talking about perspectives where it was all about, oh, the job of being a creative director is just managing other creatives, right? Inspiring them, telling them what to do, going over their shoulder and telling them to click on stuff. The truth is this: when you're a creative director, The people you're managing more are the executives. You're managing expectations. You're managing what they think of the creative department, what they think of creativity. Like, you have to keep that going constantly. You are managing executives now if you're a creative director. That's really important. One story, so one of my agencies that I worked at, the owner would say something like, in order to be successful, the first thing you need to know is, how does your client or how does your business make money? Do you know how your business makes money or how your client makes money? And once you do, then you need to make sure that everything helps with that, doesn't hinder it. In other words, when I go back to like having a CD that was making all these choices and I was like, oh, why are they going for the lame choice instead of the better? Like, understanding the why of how that company makes money is very important. If you're one of the executives representing creativity, you have to figure out how creativity is going to move that needle, how it's going to make money. Because I believe that ideas and creativity do improve the bottom line. That's what my whole book is all about, and how you can prove that. So it's really important that you understand that point. You have to embrace strategy. Another guy who owned the first agency I started at, right after that newspaper gig, I was talking to him about, because, I just lost this sales job. So I'm like, should I be in creative? Should I be in strategy? What's the right role? And so I was just kind of doing an interview with him. And he said, listen, Adam, here's the truth. Strategy is creative. Like, they're really different expressions of the same thing. Like, you can get a high off of making a new connection with creative ideas or making a new strategic direction and get excited about it. So I would say this, if you are going down the creative director path, you have to be able to love strategy too. It can't just be creativity. You have to really understand why. Why is the strategy working? Why does my company make money? And then blend that into your exciting world and be okay with that. There's a really good book. Douglas Davis just wrote a book called The Creative Strategy and the Business of Design, and it's all about this whole talking khaki stuff. He goes through a lot of details of what you need to learn as a creative person in order to speak the same language as business people, so you can business. All right, step 3, vision and leadership. So once you've built the relationships, once you've figured out how to talk the right language, and they have trust with you, the next thing you need to do is show competence that you have a plan. That you're not just this prima donna that's going to get up in a flash, and be done. You have to show that you understand where the company should go. So there are a lot of articles. This comes back to the idea of the design-led movement, right? We've all been fighting as creatives to get a seat at the table, so that designers and creativity has a seat at the table right up there with the numbers and the finance talk, right? But there are a lot of articles today saying that we as creatives are failing because we're not doing great with that seat at the table. We've got the seat at the table, and then we're just like, okay, I don't know what to do here, right? So number 3, you need to have a vision and a plan. You can't just wing it. You need to understand best practices. You need to understand, where should our company go? If I know how it makes money, how is creativity going to get me there? And what are the things that I need to do to get there? So at one company, I was a group creative director at the agency, and I was just really, really focused on, all right, what are we doing? How are we going to come together with the creative department? We really didn't have like a single leader that was driving the whole thing. So I put together this huge plan of like a 1-year and a 5-year plan with training and what we could do for our different clients, what kind of business we're going to do, how the creative department was going to run, all these things. And I just sent it up to one of the owners saying, here's some ideas of some things that we can do. And they were like, great, you have a plan? You're ECD, make it happen, be done, right? And so that's really an important part of this. Like, if you understand where things are going, if they have trust in you, can you drive the department in the right way? Do you know where to go? So some things you need to think about before you get the opportunity to lead. Make sure you know where to go. And the important thing about that is that'll give you invisibility, that'll help you understand growth and new business, and suddenly the leadership will say, oh, that person really knows what's going on. We're going to trust in them even more. They have a plan. All right, number 4, presenting and selling. You have to be a master of meetings. So my kids sometimes ask what I'm really good at. You know how it's always like, oh, I'm a consultant and no one knows what you really are doing. My answer to them is, I'm really good at meetings. That's really the truth. At this point in my career, like that is a skill. You have to be really, really good at meetings. Meaning that you can't just be a wallflower. You can't be the lone wolf that comes in and soaks it all up and then goes back and thinks about it and grumbles about it, right? Here's an important thing to think about. Creative people, when we're getting stuff done, it's usually because we're in the cave. That's where we get stuff done. We don't get anything done in meetings, so we hate meetings. But what about leadership? What about strategy people? Meetings is where they get stuff done. That's where everything happens for them. And the reason why you need to be present in that moment in those meetings is because when those decisions are made, and you're now the creative director and you're in charge of the vision of where creativity is going, if you're not present and you're not there to guide that, then you're done. You have to be there to make the call. You have to be there to be the great defender of design, the champion of creativity. If not you, who? So you need to be there, you need to understand them, you need to talk their khaki, and you need to have a vision, and then you can say, and here's how we're going to do it, and be there to protect it and guide it. That's a huge part of it. So it's not just picking which ideas are going, but it's the why. It's everything behind that. And being good at it is really, really important. You have to be dynamic. So there was this one person that I knew, and she was a strategist and worked for a completely different company. And one time we were at a lunch thing, and she's like, oh, I got to go because our agency is presenting, the creative director is presenting, and we'll just call him Mr. Dunn. And I was really intrigued. I was like, what? Like, what's so exciting about it? And she's like, oh, if you have ever seen him present, it is just magical. Like, everyone in the department wants to come. We don't care what he's trying to sell us. We just want to see him present because it's so fun just to see how he's going to put on this big, all the pomp and circumstance, whatever it may be. But they really love it. So get good at presenting. If you have to focus on your, presentation skills, great. Work on that. If you need to be a salesperson, great. We're all in sales, right? Everyone's in sales. So focus on your presentation skills. All right, next, managing the creative machine. After you've done all that work, now we're going to turn a little bit internally into the process. And those awesome words, structure and process, are two really sexy words, right? You just like eat them up. But you got to think about this. You now are in charge of structure and process. So let's talk about structure. You build decks now. Even though you know all these great creative tools, you have to build presentations. And why? Because you're constantly selling stuff up. And also, the creative department changes all the time. I don't know about you guys, but every agency, every company I've been in, I swear it's like every 6 months, the clients change or something needs to be moved around or the department just, they need, some people are bored in their roles and they need to switch it up, but it changes all the time. And so I'm constantly working with my boss of like going through and saying, all right, how are we rearranging the creative department? How are we rearranging the teams? Who's talented and needs to be on this piece of business? How do we need to change things up? It happens all the time. So that's a big part of your life. Love it. Structure. And process, even better. If you're in charge, how do we save files to the server? What's the naming convention? Who gets to save files? How do we do it? Where do we keep our servers even organized? How do we do creative briefs? Who's in the process? Like the process of reviews is a big one. Because all the time, for efficiency's sake, creativity is always taken off the table. No, we'll just quickly do this and we'll just run through and so-and-so is going to decide and then we're done. So you as a creative director, you have to fight constantly for that process. You have to make sure, do we have a seat? Do we have an opportunity to give creativity a great chance at success in the beginning of the process? And what about at the end in approving? Is the approval process, if you walk away, it's going to be run and creativity is going to fall off. So you have to manage structure and process. There are a lot of other things too that fall into this category. Tech needs. I mean, tech envy is a huge issue. I don't know. Maybe your company is like, we'll give everyone all the latest stuff and the best, technology, whatever. I doubt it. So another part of my job is like, all right, who gets which computers and how old are they going to be and who's going to get the big monitor versus the small, and when someone else complains, like tech envy is a huge deal. So you got to deal with things like that. You have to deal with budgets. How am I going to deal with, all right, who goes to this conference right here? I'm sure you had to deal with that, of like getting approvals to come to the conference, right? I can't just let everyone go to every conference, so I've only got a limited budget. How do you deal with all of those budgetary things? Do I do team parties? How often do I do them? How much do we spend on those? How much do I have to go back to the suits and ask for more money? Like travel, everything. Like there's a lot that you have to figure out, so you can't roll your eyes at the numbers. Training. Who gets training? Do we do online training? Do we let them go to places? How do you have, go back to school? Or what are the options that I have in training? What about best practices? If there's changing or trends coming up, how do I figure those things out? How do I inspire the team? Do I do internal workshops? Do I keep that? It's all about, from awards to events to whatever it may be, it's keeping that creative machine humming. Like it's really understanding every little bit of process and every little bit of structure to make sure that everyone else, all the other creatives on the team, have what they need to succeed and do an awesome job. So there's a lot to think about in that. All right, number 6, resourcing. This is super exciting. You know, we became a creative not because we wanted to be a project manager, right? Or not because we wanted to be a runner taking all the different things around. But here's the truth. You are a project manager when you're a creative director, all the time. And some of you may have help with other project managers. I know I do, but that doesn't mean I'm not doing it. When new projects come in, I have to decide who does this project fit? Who's low? Like, especially this whole workload balance. Do I know which person has a ton of work or which person has a little bit of work? Like, how do I know what's going on in everyone's, what's on everyone's plate? How do I pick all the projects? How do I manage it? Like, there's so much that goes into project management that you're going to still be doing a good chunk of that as a creative director. I know I do all the time. I'm always thinking through who on the team. In fact, at my last job, at the last agency, it was so chaotic because, there was like a team of 55 creatives, and I had no idea who was busy, who wasn't. And they were all in little groups, which is great, but then how did I know if that group was balanced with this? And it was really confusing. So I'm going to show you my nerd out moment here of something I called the whelm scale. Because I didn't know if people were overwhelmed or underwhelmed, right? And there was no real method to it. And it was so hard to say, like, oh, if you have 5 projects, that's perfect, and I'll make sure this person has 5 projects. And I know this is a bit of an eye chart. Remember, I told you how I'm going to get the deck afterwards, and then you can see it all. But it was more than that, because sometimes some projects are huge, and sometimes they're small, and sometimes someone has like 10 projects, but they're all out for review, and they're just sitting there, with their feet up on the desk. It was really hard. So I went through this dumb, beautiful mind moment where, like, okay, what are all the different things that I can measure? It could be like the hours per week, the number of projects, how often they're presenting, how much stuff they're doing, how many times do they get lunch. And I know this was, like, for me it was terrible because this was during agency days where it was like, if I wasn't having an all-nighter once a week, then there was a problem, right? So I need to fix that. So this may be a little harsh, and you can dial it up or down according to your company of how much stuff people need to do. But for me, it was just a great way to say, and I would have people self-select, like, all right, how whelmed are you? If you're at a 5, you've got X number of projects, this is about your hours you're working, all this stuff, you're billable, whatever, then I could get an idea of who was light and who was heavy, and then go from there. So a little bit silly, but at least it helped me. All right, next, number 7. This is what I refer to as the passionate hustle. So here's a truth in my experience of the 3 different types of employees that I've worked with, or people, creative people. Number 1, there are some that you could say, you bring them a project, and they'll say, yes, exciting, this is great. Even though they have like 10 to 15 projects that are going, but they're just like super jazzed to get new stuff, because it's always an opportunity, right? The second type of person, you'll bring them a project and they're like, oh, I kind of have a lot of stuff. There's a little bit of moaning that'll go on. They're like, but I'll take it. Let me just do it. No, don't go away. I'll take it. That's fine. I'll do it. And then the third person will just like complain, oh, I've got so much to do. Like, there's no way. We got to push it off. We can't take it anymore. We're like dying here. You've got to be crazy. And they'll push and push and push and never want to take the project. And the truth is, that third person is most likely the person with like 2 projects, maybe 3, right? And there's a lot of head nodding, and I know that's terrible. Maybe this is like, what does Admo know about, human understanding and how people work? But I just have felt like that's kind of the way it works, right? And so here's the truth. You're never going to get, like, all that stuff that I just talked about, and that's a lot of stuff, all those ankle biters from relationships and meetings and blah, blah, like all that crap will eat you alive. And you'll never get to the rest of this. We're never going to make it to 8 or 9 if you don't hustle. And the hustle doesn't mean, and I'm going to show you something here terrible in a second that Josh, I think he may be in the back and he can heckle me on this, but it's all about, I'm not talking about being an essentialist at this moment. I'm just, because that's important. If you want to read the book on essentialism, great. And that's important to find like the right projects that you need to work on. But as a CD, it's really, really important for me to understand all the projects. So I had another creative director, and at one point he made some funny comment. He's like, I can handle about 75 projects. And beyond that, stuff start to fall off. And I was like, 75, that's crazy. Like, that's a lot. But when he explained it, it's really important because when you're the CD, I have to know all the projects of everyone on the team, not just my own projects. And I have to be able to speak to them. So if management comes and says, what about, project number 762? I need to know what's going on, at least enough that I can talk to it. So it's really, really important to understand what's your capacity. How much can I take? And I've got to hustle. I've got to keep pushing so that I can get to those awesome big projects. So that, it's like for me, when I came to Adobe, there was a lot of chaos around writing and the tone and voice. And so on the side, we had to do a little bit of hustle to come up with these guidelines to writing and the Adobe voice and what it meant and really get crisp on all of that. And the only way you're going to get to those awesome big new business projects or whatever, hero projects you want to work on is if you have hustle. And so, this is a bad thing. This was just a capture of my week last week before I came here. And to some people that looks horrific. Like I look at some of the people on my team, I'll see the calendar and they'll have like 4 meetings throughout the week and I'll be like, oh, blessed calendar. And you can see like there are days that I'm triple booked or double booked or whatever it may be. And this is terrible. It's not essentialism, Josh, if you're in here. I know it. I understand that. But sometimes it's just that's the beast. Like there's so much stuff coming at you. If you build trust, if you've got all those relationships, people were going to want you. They're going to want to work with you. I should move it before you really look at what my dirty little schedule is like. What's that? Someone took a photo. Oh, it's not that exciting. It's going to be in the slides after. All right. We're finally to number 8. Number 8 and 9, the things that we really thought creative directing was all about. Managing other creatives. Keeping those kangaroos from fighting. So beyond just, telling people what to do, let's talk a little bit more about what does it mean to manage other creatives. One of the things that people don't think about in getting this job are people problems, HR issues, sizzle. Like who wants that? That is awesome. So if you're going to do this, just be prepared that you need to have empathy and anger management. Like I kid you not, there were some people on my team that, first we couldn't put them in front of a client and they would get mad all the time. And it's like I literally had one person on the team that had to take anger management classes. Like it wasn't even a joke. So understanding how people work together, who works well together, who doesn't, like there's going to be a lot of that stuff. So just be prepared. Again, do your homework. Try and find your Zen place so that you can deal with that kind of stuff and be able to manage it. Next, what about career paths? Like I showed you some examples of the career paths that are going on, like the new ones. But do you know what the whole team, what their paths are? How can you help them? And it's not necessarily your job to guide and direct their careers, but you should be ready when they come to you with questions that you at least know where they can go or what they can do. So understanding their career paths. Be able to mentor. How do you mentor the whole department and make sure that everyone's like jazzed and excited? I mean, we have like a Friday workshop, a creative workshop, and the whole purpose of that, and it's been going for 4.5 years at Adobe, is just that every Friday the creatives can come in and we can just talk about creativity, show examples, share cool work, just get them jazzed so they can go back out and do awesome stuff. So how are you going to deal with all that? Make sure you're mentoring and guiding. Next is talent and recruitment. So at the agency before Adobe, I joined the American Advertising Federation board, and I was on it for 11 years. And one of the main reasons I was on that board is because of recruiting. Because I would see all the cool rock stars from all the other agencies in town. I would meet a lot of great people. And there was a big part. If you don't have a plan for recruiting, you're going to sink. Like, how do you know where to get people? How do I know where to find them? Unless you have a company that like, everyone wants to work at, which is easy. You just post it and you have a cajillion people applying. But that's not true for every single company. And so having a plan for recruiting, where you're going to find new talent, how you're going to search for them. Here's another funny story is that one woman came and she wanted a job as a senior writer, and at the time I didn't have a job. But I still brought her in, we have a great interview, talked about things, and you got to do that all the time. So think of how many hours you got to set aside for just meeting people, because you never know when the job's going to come. And in my case, it was lucky because she ended up being the sister of my current boss right now. And if I had kind of like, oh, no thanks, pass, I'm sure that would have come back to haunt me. So thankfully, I had a plan, and I would always interview people, and I'd be nice about it. So have a plan for recruitment. And then finally, some other things that you may not think about are office moves and logistics. With all of those changing creative department plans, there's always going to be people coming and going, and who gets to sit where, and who gets what stuff. And like, there's just a lot of logistics that you need to think about when you're managing creatives. It's not just standing over their shoulder and telling them what to do. All right, finally, number 9. The whole reason why you joined this industry in the beginning, the awesome craft. And why I do have it at the bottom of the list, and there's a reason I'll show you in a minute, but I do want to emphasize that it's not unimportant. This is super important, and certainly this right here is the reason why you become talented and you even have a shot at everything else. And to be fair, there are probably some CDs who have done really good at maybe like 8, 9, and 7, and they've got the hustle, and they're pretty talented, but really they're terrible at all the other stuff, and they've been promoted, but at least they've got this, right? And you may say that, and that's probably harsh of me to say it, but I just feel like it's still important. It's still valuable. And another thing to keep in mind is at the very end of the day, you cannot do it all. If you are going to be a manager, if you're going to be the creative director, you can't just do it all. If jobs come in, it's so much easier sometimes to say, oh, I could knock this thing out in an hour. I can just quickly design it and it's done. And it'll take me more time to go find one of the creatives, get them up to speed, explain what's going on, have them do it. We do a few back and forths, refine it, get it to a place that's good, and then I send it off, right? But that's bad management. There was a speaker two years ago at Max, Stephen Gates, had a presentation. He talked about how sometimes he'd just make up a project and give it to one of his managers just to see if they'd do that, right? It's a little sneaky. But it's important to keep that in mind. You cannot do it all, so you need to be a good manager and give those opportunities. So here's the full list. And now, here's the truth. Again, when we started out, you go to the internet, what does it tell us about being a creative director? It's just 8 and 9. That's all we talk about. And my expectation starting out is it's just 8 and 9. But there's so much more. And I hope that at least going through some of this has opened your eyes up to see what are all the other jobs? What are all the other responsibilities? What's all the stuff I have to do? And then now I want you to go back and think the perspective of leadership. So when they're looking for the next CD, are they going to start at the bottom of the list and say, all right, who's the most talented? Let's promote him. Probably not. They're going to look at, and they won't know this list, but intuitively they're going to say, all right, who can speak Khaki, who understands our business, who knows where we're making money, who can I connect with, who do I trust, who's got a vision, who's doing all this stuff, who can manage the team, and it's not going to fall apart. Like they're going to be thinking, emotionally at least, of all these other things, and that's when they're going to make the choice, right? But here's the truth. That's a lot of stuff. And I fail at it all the time. And you will fail at it all the time. You're not going to be able to be perfect at all of those things constantly. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean we need to try. It's important to at least keep pushing and trying and working on it, and so that you can become an awesome CD. All right, so let's think back now. I just want to talk about, now that you at least understand the steps, you understand the skill sets, what's the plan for you becoming a CD? I would say, first of all, back to that question, is this the right path? Will this make me happy or will I be miserable? If you looked at all that stuff that I just showed, from whelm scales to calendars to all that other stuff, and you're like, forget it, that sounds miserable, find the path that's right for you. But if it seems exciting, and I think it's exciting, I love it, I love my job. If you've answered that question, then we can move on. Next, learn those skills. Learn the 9 skills of being a CD. I'm sure when I was going through the list, you could see for yourself where you have, gaps. Where do I need to learn more? Do I need to learn more at presenting? Do I understand relationships? Am I a lone wolf? What am I doing? Be honest with yourself. And if you're missing in some of those areas, what an awesome opportunity. You can go out and learn it right now, right? There's nothing holding you back from learning all those awesome skills. Because the next thing you need to do is you need to do those things. And here's a trick. Do it so well and so effectively, you forget that it's even a list. You forget that you're even trying to do those things. It just comes naturally. And once you're good at all that stuff, and I'm going to teach you another test here in a minute, that's when the promotion will come. I guarantee when you take on the mantle of the company and not your portfolio, that's when you will see the gaps. That's when you will see what you need to do, what's important, right? Where are the opportunities? One of my earlier creative directors, the same guy who didn't promote me on that dark day in December, a year later when I finally made it, he said, Adam, I just want you to know, I could see that you're finally looking at the company and what matters rather than your portfolio. Back then it was all about, oh, I'm awesome, I'm doing ideas, and it's all about building my portfolio, and some things I would just let go, and I would just focus on my stuff. But I guarantee if you do this, if you take on the mantle of your company, it will be noticed. And after a while, after you've seen those gaps and you're working through and you see the vision, you know what you need to do, and you're doing all that stuff, you'll look back and realize you've already made the jump. So while right now, for some of you, it may look really daunting to make that jump, and that list looks crazy weird and stuff that you need to figure out, once you're doing it, you'll look back and it's just like you won't even think about that gap because you're already there. So let's go back to our little one-on-one. How do you know if you're ready? Let's talk about some of the conversations I've had with people who maybe, right now, not too long ago, we were hiring for a creative director on Adobe, and I had interesting conversations with people, as well as just good one-on-ones with people. So imagine this. If the conversation in your one-on-one with your manager is all about, oh, this is great work, and I'm really, I feel like I'm doing awesome, and clients are loving it, it's all about my work, my stuff, you're not ready. Or if you're having a conversation and it goes like this, oh, we're talking about some of the things higher up on the list, like, oh, those stakeholders, they're a bunch of idiots, and they're lame, and they don't understand good creativity, and they're just always, picking the dumb stuff, and we just need to move on, and blah. Like, think about those conversations. Those are talking about, the things at the top is terrible, and you're still focused on the bottom. You're not ready. But if I'm having a conversation with someone, and they're coming in and saying, listen, I had a great conversation with so-and-so, and I've got this vision, this plan, and here's what's missing. Here's what we need to do. This is where we need to go, and can you help support me? And I'm definitely going to be moving down this path. That's a key indicator that that person is taking on the mantle of the company, right? They're thinking about relationships. They're understanding business. Another good sign is if someone comes over and says, hey, here's this cool article, or hey, here's a book I was reading last week, or I'm doing this other thing. And those are good indicators to me that they're focusing on the bigger picture and all this other stuff. That tells me they're ready. So when the time comes and there's an opportunity and there's a new ACD position, guess who I'm going to go to? It's not going to be the person who comes in and says, I'm senior and my work is awesome and why are you not promoting me? And they're a lone wolf. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So really, really good test. Ask yourself what's going on in your one-on-one. And of course, don't cheat now. Don't go to your creative director and be like, so I was having a relationship with someone where I talked to Khaki and I had a plan. And, structure process stuff. But anyhow, is there an opening on that other account that maybe it's going to be pretty obvious. You can't fake it. You have to be sincere and honest about what you're really thinking. So here's your moment of truth. If you want to be a CD, if you want to make that jump, the truth is this: the only person holding you back is you. It's not your boss. It's not your creative director. It's not the CEO of your company. They're not turds sitting in their offices thinking how they're going to ruin your life. They're not. They're focused on other stuff. If you want to be a creative director, it's your choice. You know what to do right now. You don't have to live the day in December like I did. You don't have to just guess and be all cheesed that someone else gets the job, right? You don't have to march in there saying, why not me? I've been here longer. You know what you need to do. Go out and learn those skills. There's a lot of soft skills, and there's tons of room to grow. Once you figure that out, and once you are focused on all that other stuff, I guarantee it's going to happen. Your day will come, whether it's at your current company, or once you see the gaps and the problems and the issues, you realize you need to go find another company and find another position, but you will be prepared. You will interview, and in those interviews, they will know you know what you're talking about. You're the right person for the job. And this is really important because just as I talked about how creativity is at the bottom of the list and you got to do all of this paperwork and all this other crap, and that doesn't sound that exciting. But I do want you to keep this in mind. Your creativity is what brought you to this opportunity in the first place. Think about leaders and other senior management, whatever it may be. They have trained themselves through MBA courses, through finance classes, to focus on logic. They're focusing on the numbers and the statistics, and they speak that language really well, and that's what they care about. You, as a creative person, have trained yourself to be super sensitive to emotions. That may be a general statement, but in my mind, that's what it is. If you think about what we're really good at understanding the customer and what their experience is all about, and creating experiences and designing awesome stuff and writing awesome stuff so that those customers have great experiences. So do not lose that. Number 9, it's still on the list. It's not gone, but it's still part of it. Everyone's going to be a working CD. You're still going to have to create. And don't lose that. Make sure that you hold on to that because that's what makes you unique. That's what gives you a seat at the table. That's why you have a unique opportunity to be a champion of creativity. And don't forget it because that's super awesome. And then one last ask that I have for you is once you get there, don't forget to turn around and offer a lifeline to the next person behind you. That's really what I'm trying to do with this presentation. Let everyone else know how to do it. Let everyone else know how to get that job, how to become a creative director, how to move up, how to have a great career. That's really important. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to get to just a couple asks here. So this is for both introverts and extroverts. You all get an opportunity. If you want to reach out to me, there's my email address. This is the one time you'd bring up your cameras and take a picture. This is all you need. So if you want to get a hold of this presentation or a whole slew of other great articles and things, at least I think they're great. Maybe they're not. They're probably terrible. But you can email me, and I will send you a copy of the deck or anything else. Or you can go, I made a landing page, adammorgan.com, my website, /max, small letters, not caps. And there you have the opportunity to download the deck and join my, my email list. That's the one ask I would love. If any of you thought this was valuable or helpful, please join my email list. I actually have my book that's coming out in 3 months. There's some early copies that I'll have in a couple weeks. And so whoever signs up for the newsletter, I'll just take during that time and I'll give out a bunch of free books to the people who signed up. So go back, make sure you check, get the information. And the list is just basically I send out new articles or I'll give you updates on the books and whatever it may be. And then the last thing, since the last class was all about presenting and not having a Q&A, and I was going to do it, but I'm not going to do it now. Afterwards, you can all just come up if you have any questions and we'll yap and we'll have great relationships and conversations and I'll love it. It'll be awesome because you're going to email me and we're going to talk all the time. But if not, for now, what I'd love you to do is go onto the app because it's only open for the next half hour, I think. And if you found this was good information, there's no like evil genius at Adobe behind the scenes thinking, what are the types of classes we should do? This was just me thinking, oh, I'll do this class. I think it's a valuable thing. And so if you can get on there and if you give a good review and say this was good, helpful information, then we'll give more and more of this stuff next time. So it's a good way for you guys to give us feedback. So please go on and give some feedback. And that's it. Thank you very much.